We are here at the 27th ISODARCO Winter Course. ISODARCO is the International School on Disarmament and Research on Conflict. And Katherine Kelleher, she's co-director of this ISODARCO edition. She's senior fellow at the Watson Institute for International Relations at the Brown University and College Park professor, University of Maryland, College Park. And this ISODARCO is devoted to find out what will be of the nuclear disarmament in the coming years. What would nuclear disarmament actually look like? And we are only 5 days away from the inauguration of Barack Obama as new president of the United States. What are the prospects for nuclear disarmament with the Obama presidency in the States?
I think the first thing is that it will have much more attention as even a potential goal than it's had really in the last 8 years. For a number of reasons, some of them, I think, perhaps misunderstandings, others positive opposition to the past record, particularly the Clinton administration. Bush's team decided that arms control was something that they didn't need. Part of it came from their belief in the efficacy of American power. America was the sole remaining superpower. It could, in fact, do what it wished and punish whom it wished on the basis of its own capabilities. I don't think Obama shares that assumption. And in fact, many members of his team are people who've had quite a lot of experience in the arms control area.
But there has been here and elsewhere much talk about the initiative taken a couple of years ago by 4 so-called wise men, and the group includes Henry Kissinger and former Secretary of State with Reagan, actually, George Shultz, plus 2 eminent, prominent Democrats, Bill Perry and Sam Nunn. And what they are proposing actually is a revolutionary idea. Moving towards zero when it comes to nuclear weapons, even though they're proposing to do it through a number of steps. Do you think any of these steps has become more likely with this Obama presidency?
I do think so. I again think that these are people who would describe themselves as realists, who were tough guys in their time, and maybe even want now to think about what they believe will be a better future. And they're committed to it. Particularly, I think, the originator of this, George Shultz, who, as Reagan's Secretary of State for much of the Reagan 2-term presidency, really had an enormous impact on national policy and still has an enormous network of friends and people whom he influences by his wishes. I think what they've done is they've challenged the new president to make this a real goal of American policy and to try to persuade others around the world, such as the Italian officials who issued their own statement, or the recent statement by the German former presidents and prime ministers, foreign ministers, to in fact look again at this area that has so long been dismissed as unrealistic. What are nuclear weapons for? What can we use them for? Is the risk of having them greater than this value, particularly given the new conditions in the 21st century?
Well, beyond appeals, done in the States, here in Europe, elsewhere, what do you think we Europeans and the Russians, whatever is non-American, said in this, huge debate on moving toward zero nuclear weapon, and what do you think others should do to actually interact in a constructive way with the U.S.?
Well, I think there are many things that can be done. The principal one, I think, is to articulate an agenda, a short-term agenda, a medium-term agenda. The first thing, of course, is always education, to put this back on the national discussion agenda, if you will, and to talk about this in a way that reminds people, many of whom think the problem is solved, that it isn't solved, that there is a risk involved in simply possessing the weapons, having to store them, worrying about their safety, worrying about what would happen if a terrorist group somehow got access, perhaps worrying about what we used to call unauthorized use, that some group or of officials or a group of people who were of unsettled mind would simply take it upon themselves to cause some kind of an explosion, perhaps not a real nuclear bomb explosion, but a pretty nasty, dirty bomb or plutonium bomb explosion with the weapons that we already have. And we have far more than anyone can contemplate using against any of the threats that we currently face.
Last question, Katherine. I mean, the last 8 years, and coinciding more or less with the Bush administration, have been also years in which the attention towards arms control and disarmament has been very low on average, I think, including from universities and think tanks. And we are here in a winter school, and that goes on and on. I think it began 22 years ago, actually.
Yes.
And do you think the academic world has something new to say, should be more, proactive in the coming years?
Well, I'm fascinated because Brown, which is a leading liberal arts school in the United States, really hasn't had courses that dealt with these issues since the beginning of the 90s. And before a course that I taught this fall, there were few, if any, courses that even mentioned nuclear weapons, let alone devoted 10 weeks or 14 weeks or a whole year to the study of the developments of the forces we have and how they are intended to be used and whether or not that was in the usual interest. I think there's a huge task in front of us of reminding people, if they've forgotten, or perhaps educating a new generation about these issues and why they matter.
Thank you. Thank
you.
you very much.
You managed to outstay the bell.